I'm from Colombia.
I am Venezuelan.
I'm from China.
I'm from Costa Rica.
I grew up in India.
Certainly, a lot of the people that I know that participated in this have said they understand a lot more about the cultural differences now, maybe gained a little more confidence to talk to people. I think it's been a great start.
When you move to a place like this, where it's a huge expanse of space, but the space is not just physical, it's also mental, isn't it? You know?
Lauren had put together this amazing framework, to explore cultural differences.
You have to live your process, your own process. You learn to adapt to a new culture. Is always an opportunity to grow and to evolve, to be big as a person.
I mean, did you experience culture shock?
Oh, definitely. Culture shock, from my experience, I think it's normal. Even in China, if I stay in China to different other states, other provinces, other cities, still have culture shock.
I felt alone. Frankly, I felt alone. Even though I come with my husband and my son, I have deep feelings of loneliness and isolation.
Actually, everything was new country, new city, new people, new house, new school. I was so excited.
Having mixed feelings with a lot of expectations, illusions.
Just I was surprised to see Western land and modern culture. Yeah, it was made me excited. Yeah.
I felt very amazed and very surprised because everything looked so different from my country. Everything was huge, like roads, especially malls. I still remember when I first went to the mall. Oh my God, I felt like this kid in a candy store. I didn't know what to pick or what to buy. So many things very different from my country.
I missed my friends. I missed the feeling of living in an island community where there's so many, you have a lot of deep relationships. There's a lot of intimacy between persons.
It was very different. In India, it was hot and summer all year round, and so it was a very tight-knit community. We all did everything together, and then all of a sudden we moved to Albany in December. It's dark all the time. There's a lot of snow, and also getting home from school on the school bus. I was always afraid that I would miss the bus because we didn't have school buses in India.
One of the cultural differences we talked about in our 6 weeks was the difference between etiquettes. The etiquette from your home culture versus the etiquette here in North America or the United States.
In China, when we eat, we have a party or family members to go to the restaurant, have a lot of course, a lot of plates. Right? We say, okay, 4 or 8 course at least. 8 course is the standard, right? And most of the time we put our elbow on the table, like on the table, and eat a big piece, big piece, like to talk aloud. And also most of the time people will argue with each other to get a chance to make the payment, right?
Oh,
Pay the
okay.
bill, that
Okay.
means. Yeah, so that's different from the United States. And in the States, I know that like quiet, eat a small piece, and put elbows down, and just make a payment for what I need to pay. Just share. That means that's a share. Share the bill.
Now, I know people dress differently in Central and South America than they do here. Because you are used to dressing differently.
Yes, when I was in Costa Rica, I always dressed very, very short, and very small tank tops. So when I moved to the United States, I dressed in the same way because to me it was normal. Costa Rica is a tropical country, very hot and humid, so for us it's very acceptable to to dress in this way. So when I moved to the United States, I used to dress in the same way, and I felt very, very upset because my son told me that one of his friends wasn't allowed to come over anymore because his mom thought I was dressing very provocatively. And that made me feel very upset because I didn't mean to do that. The way I dressed in my country.
At first, we stayed at a hotel for 3 days after moving to the States. And then we moved to the house that we had leased in advance. But I found the hot water did not work, and the handyman came to my place. When he arrived at my front door, I asked him to shoes off politely, but he looked uncomfortable, and he refused my request.
Wow.
Yeah, he entered with his shoes and finished his work. After that, I do not want people feel bad.
Yeah, that's a great story about etiquette differences, right? In Korea, you wouldn't even have to ask, right? People would just do it.
Yeah.
About greetings, I think the big difference between my culture and American one is that we are prone to give kisses and hugs in a way that for Americans is unthinkable. For example, in social events, party, it's normal that everybody gives long hugs, kisses 1 time, 2 times. It's totally accepted. It's no problem with that.
Yeah, almost the common way to greeting is bow or shake hands. And if you are close with others, we can wave hands, or younger people than me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not common to waving hands to elder people. Yeah. It can seem to be impolite.
Interesting. Okay, so there's a difference in almost how you approach hierarchy, right? So the older someone is, the more respect you would give them, and so maybe that's why you do a more respectful greeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
How we give and receive compliments varies across cultures, just as etiquette did.
Yeah, compliments. I think everybody get compliments from others. We have a lot of same things. China and the United have same things about compliments. Something different. According to Chinese culture, people always want to express humility, right?
Humility, yes.
Yes. So, for example, like if you say you did a very good job, they'll say so. Compared with others, it's not good enough. They'll say in the United States, we'll thank you. All right.
Yeah.
But in Chinese, most of the time we say, really? Yeah, really? Yeah.
About compliments, giving and receiving compliments, yeah, is not familiar in my culture. Yeah, I think it is because people think compliments is something that is done when it is very good or very good and amazing, rather than ordinary and small thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I know compliments in the States is normal and one of the subjects for small talk.
Yeah.
I think when people got compliments, they feel uncomfortable. So sometimes they ignore the compliments. No. Yeah, like that.
Yeah, really try to downplay the compliment.
Yeah.
I know some things surprised you when you came here. Tell us about the interview that you went to and what surprised you when you got a compliment.
Yes. I surprised because of the difference between the compliments in our country and here, because when I live here, I realized that the compliments are part of the culture from American people. Because from the classrooms, the teachers encourage their students from kindergarten on to do compliments each other. Because in my country, the compliments are just from man to woman. So I remember that when I went to the interview, the lady who guided me to go to the office of the interviewer made me a compliment like, "Oh, I love your pants," and I say, "What does she says?" And I didn't understand that because I said, "What does she says?" And even I thought, when I understood, I thought that I was wearing inappropriate clothes.
Oh my.
Or something like that, because I say, why she
Why is
said,
she talking about your pants?
my pants? To be honest, I really love the way Americans compliment. It's a very respectful way and very polite, and make you feel better, make you feel happy, and encourage you to do better. For example, my piano teacher, every time I do well on my test, he gives me these little stickers, so cute. Sometimes it's a little happy face, sometimes it's a little star, and that encouraged me to do better the next time. I think it's very important in the way you compliment. So when I came here and I saw Americans telling me in a very respectful way these kind of things, I fell in love.
Sometimes the way people think about time can be different. You had an experience with people and coming to class on time, right?
Yes, I used to remember that. It was one of my English conversation groups. My classmate always showed up late, and one day it was just the teacher and me, and nobody was there. And he was very upset because he said that time is money, and people shouldn't be so unreliable and rude and impolite. And at that time, I thought like him. I have the same feeling, but then I said, wait a minute. I come from a country when we do the same thing. Because in Costa Rica, being on time, it means like being 30 minutes or 15 minutes after the time you're supposed to be there. Yes. But do you know what, Kathy? After learning about our cultural differences, I learned a lot of things. Being not being on time, it doesn't mean that it's because you are rude or impolite or you don't appreciate other people's time. It's a cultural thing. But I also believe something. If you live in the United States and you know that for Americans, time is money, they don't like to waste time. You should be more punctual.
Well, the West Indian approach to time is very relaxed, okay? Socially, for sure. The only thing that starts on time is maybe church, right? But everything else, you know, so for parties, you know, if you're invited to a party and you're told, okay, the party starts at 4 o'clock, you do not go to the party for 4 o'clock. You know, maybe 5:30, maybe 6. Yes, that's when the
like
party.
a big difference.
Yes, that's
we're
when,
talking 4:15.
No,
Okay.
that's when the party starts, because you have to give the host, right, the time to set up everything, because they're not ready at 4 either.
Okay, so the 4 o'clock is like the host time.
It's like the host time. They tell you that time so that you can be there at 5:30.
Interesting. Okay.
Right? So when somebody comes in at 4 o'clock, no, why are they there at that time? You know. So what happened? My first child. It was our first birthday party invitation, and I think the party started at 2 o'clock, and we arrived somewhere about 3:30, and the host was like, "But everything's done." The entertainment, you know, the clown, the clown had already left, the cake had been cut, you know. She said, "But it's done." I was like, "But I thought you said it started at 2 o'clock."
And then she must have just looked at her watch and said, "Yeah."
Yeah. But you know, I was just not accustomed to that at all. And you know, and very early on, when I had folks over to ours, and you know, I told them, okay, come at 3, and they came exactly at 3. I thought, good gracious, I can't believe they're here already.
When we were in Chile, it was my husband and I, 2 Americans, 1 German guy, and the other people that were on this. It was like a little 3-day tour around southern Chile, and the rest of the people were South American, different kinds of South American, predominantly Brazilian. And the guide would say, okay, we're going to meet in the lobby of the hotel at 8:30 in the morning. 8:25, there's me and my husband and the German guy. 9 o'clock, me and my husband and the German guy. 9:30, finally the other people are starting to creep in. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is awful. You know, how can this be? We're going to miss all the things we're supposed to see on our tour. And I finally realized that that's what the tour guide expected. And he told us 8:30 because if we left at 9:30 or 9:45, we would see everything that we needed to see. So it's just the flip side of not having the same understanding of time.
Now I know for American it's important to be on time for everything you do. If you arrive early, it's going to be easy to solve your business. But if you arrive late and you know that this is for American is disrespectful, and you have to apologize, you are going to start your business in a disadvantaged position. You are going to apologize, you are going to explain why you are late, so you don't open the space to a good communication.
Yeah, time is just not that important. I mean, I hate to say it, but we always say, look, if we want to start the party at 7, you should invite everybody at 6, because by the time 7 rolls around, most of your guests will be there. So that's pretty common. And then if you actually do show up on time, you're early. You know, they're not even ready for you. But yeah, I don't know why that is. They feel like it's just an estimated time, like show up around that appointment time.
I remember the first morning we went to work, we stopped at the cafe because we would walk to work. We stopped at the cafe just to get breakfast. We just wanted a café au lait and a pain au chocolat. And you know, that was served. I mean, it took a while to get attention from a waiter, you know, which was quite different from what we would experience in the US. But we would order the whatever it was we would order, and then the waiter would just disappear. You know, and we would observe people at a cafe just sitting there for an hour or longer, and we just wanted the bill because we needed to get to work. You know, our mindset was not into the concept of a cafe and being relaxed and talking to people. So I remember that as being one of the first experiences. But as well, you know, I got into the office my first day at 7 in the morning. Because here in the US, in order to avoid rush hour, and in order for me to be able to get on the phone and communicate with my European colleagues, I would get up early and get into the office at 7. So I got to the office at 7. Security had no idea who I was or why I was there. But when I kind of got through that and got to my office, I sat and I sat and I sat, because the first stirrings that I heard in the hallway didn't happen until about 9:30, 10 o'clock. And this was big culture shock for me because nobody was in the office. It was almost as though I was going to have to readjust my whole time schedule in accordance with what I was seeing with the French. And they would stay in the office until 7, 8 o'clock at night. The day was tilted a little bit.
I was in the gym when somebody asked me for the first time, what do you do for a living? I didn't know anything about idioms and I didn't know about anything, so the way he asked me that question is very rude and very impolite in my culture. And also, we don't ask this kind of question when you are having a small talk. So I felt very, very offended. But now I realize that this is a very common question in the United States.
For example, in American, it's totally okay, totally normal, totally expected to ask, what are you doing for a living? Where do you live? Where you are from? In my culture, I think probably you never do this question in the first meeting or in the first 5 minutes. But I realized that here in the States you have, you know, like ready answers to this question, and these are ways to initialize an informal conversation. It's never something that is inquired in your private life.
When we were in China one time and we were going to the Great Wall, and you know, you approach it and you pass all these souvenir shops, of course, and you walk up to get to the Great Wall, and then at the end you come back down again. And as we were on our way up, passing the souvenir shops, and again, we wanted to get there ahead of the crowd, so we were kind of rushing up, and they keep trying to catch your attention, the vendors, and saying, oh, come look, come look. And I just kept saying, oh, no, thank you, and kept going. And one of the vendors said, well, maybe later on your way down. And I said, yeah, maybe later. And in my mind, it was like brushing her off. And I was on my way down, and she came over to me, and she grabbed me by the wrist and started pulling me over to the shop and wouldn't let me go. And I was very uncomfortable. And our guide came over and talked to her and said, okay, you know, if you don't want to look, let's go. And the guide said to me, you did tell her you'd look later. I thought, whoa. I wasn't looking at that as making a promise to her, but obviously to her I was making a promise.
This was an expat who was from Israel. And Israel's this very direct culture. You could say that I think Americans are too, but less so compared to Israelis. And he would ask me this, I'm trying to figure out these American things, like, help me with this. And he said that, you know, you would casually meet your neighbors on the street, like maybe you're getting your mail or maybe you're picking up your package, I got sent to the wrong house. And he would, you know, periodically talk to his neighbor, and his neighbor would say, yeah, it's so great, we'll have you over for dinner sometime. And this leader was like, I don't understand, I kept waiting for that invitation, it just never came. Like, I kept thinking that dinner invitation was gonna be today or tomorrow or even next week, and it never came. I don't understand. And he didn't realize that that was just like a throwaway comment. It was just what Americans say, like, I enjoy spending time with you. We have nice chit chat, like, come to dinner sometime. You know, it was just casual. But because his culture is you say what you mean, where was this dinner invitation? You know, so I think he figured it out. He's like, I think he just said it. And I said, exactly. You know? That was his aha moment, I think.
Right.
And I never thought that it could be perceived that way by someone who's not American. So.
In the U.S., we are very linear thinking. You know, we put together a concrete agenda. We have time frames in which we're going to discuss each topic with a desired outcome for what we want from that discussion, all summarized in meeting minutes afterward and issued to the participants for clarity. And my observation in France is that I would be invited to a 3-hour meeting. It might have a topic. It would never have an agenda. And it would never, it was just a totally non-linear type of conversation. It was very circular. It was very tangential. And it was very frustrating to me because I never knew where it was going, how it was going to end, what the next steps were going to be. What was explained to me is that this is part of the creative process in France, that you don't take such a linear approach because that doesn't generate as much options and creativity. But, you know, at some point I stepped in to start structuring some of the meetings and was met with a little bit of resistance because it was perceived to be stifling to the French creativity. So, you know, I think I had to strike a little bit of a happy balance there to sort of meet my needs as well as the needs of my colleagues in the office.
The thing that for me was important was the eye contact. The eye contact function for me now, after the course, as a new word. When you make eye contact, it's like you are saying something more, that if you don't do eye contact, you don't get it. The eye contact is like a checkpoint. We are in the same page or not, or you need additional information, or you have a question.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting about eye contact. It's something that I've thought about, not thought about over the years in my experiences in business, but I do notice that I am predisposed to think that if you don't have good eye contact, and when someone is specifically avoiding having eye contact, they must have something to hide, and it's always negative. I don't think of it as a sign of respect, for instance. I think of it as something negative. So the concept of eye contact is really
important.
It's so small, but it's so important.
Eye contact is very important in my culture, but in my opinion, when junior people are scolded by senior people, for example, parents and children, or teachers and students alike, that relation, the junior people had better lower their eyes to show their respect to the senior people. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's different than here.
Just when it is a bad situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So almost it's more respectful to look downward.
Yeah.
Whereas in the U.S., I could see how that would lead to a misunderstanding, right? People in the U.S., our culture and custom would be look me in the eye when I'm talking to you, right? So I could see how that might be very confusing. And you think that you're being respectful by lowering your eyes, but in the U.S. that's actually perceived negatively. So, yeah.
In America, you have to keep your distance from others. I say, for example, in a supermarket, in a drugstore, in the airports, you have to watch your distance. And also, it's frowned upon when you drive too close to other cars. This is not a good idea. The people felt, you know. in my culture, it's totally normal when your car is close to other. It's okay, no problem. And for example, in the supermarket, it's also normal that you pick something without waiting the person move forward. So it's different.
I think people in the States have more space than people in South Korea, because I think South Korea is a small country and there are a lot of people, so we have to have smaller space like that. So, yeah.
So people are more used to being closer together.
Yeah.
When you live on an island nation and you are you socialize with a lot of the same people. You see people regularly. You interact. You talk. There's a lot of growth that occurs together. And when you move to a place like this, where it's a huge expanse of space, and the space is not just physical, it's also mental, isn't it? You don't know your neighbor's name, maybe for a year or so, if you're lucky, right? So you have space, which is physical, and it translates into space between lives.
I realize that culture affects people one story at a time. So you can study a cultural model, that's sort of my background. What the cultural models, like Hofstede model, but you don't realize how intertwined it is in someone's everyday life. Yes, there's personality and people are different, but your belief system and how you approach things is very much dependent on your culture. So I liked hearing the stories. Remember that people approach things when they're not from this culture in very different ways. Like we explore time, we explore etiquette, we explore low context, high context, direct, indirect. So eye-opening, because when you hear it explained from someone else in a different culture, it really makes you pause. Then you say, oh, I never thought about it like that. Yeah. And there, of course, is more than one approach to time or to hierarchy or to, respect. Like, don't take it for granted that your way is the only way.
And I think one of probably the most important takeaways for me was in the very last session, we learned about the ethnocentrism. And it's like, I'm kind of cursed to look at everybody through my own cultural lens. And I realized how easy it is for me, or perhaps many of us, to judge everyone else through that lens of our own culture. And I think it's an easy habit to be in or to fall back onto, but I believe I've been much more sensitized to looking and being able to say, okay, that's a different culture. Okay, I can accept and I can understand why things may appear different to me, but that doesn't make it any different or any more right or more wrong than my own viewpoints and my own concepts of culture. And that was a very big takeaway, I think.
Well, I agree with that. Literacy volunteers, my understanding of that was always that it was centered on language. And that if you can learn the language, then, you're fine to assimilate into, your community and such. But communication is a two-way street. And, it's more than just language literacy. You need to understand the context of the culture in which you're communicating. And, I think one of the takeaways I had, and I take this also from my experience in business, is you need to be able to see others' perspectives. This is the concept that Steve is describing with the ethnocentrism. You need to be able to see things from the other person's perspective through their lens. Why are they doing things or behaving or communicating the way they're communicating? And it's really around cultural sensitivity. You need to be sensitive to the fact that you're not always right, that your culture is the way it is because it is the way it is, but others' cultures are equally valid. And so I think that that was a little bit of a gestalt for the whole cultural connection program for me.
My students are the most wonderful people. I admire them so much. I can't imagine going to a foreign country where I don't remotely speak the language, where my whole support system, my family, familiar food, familiar TV programs, availability of books in my language is just limited, and coping with that, they're so brave to do that. And I do think understanding how disconnected and unlike themselves people feel can help all of us be more sensitive to them, and I think offering a sense of connection is as important as teaching them English, honestly. And in my travels, you just realize that the world is a big place. There are many wonderful people. We're all people in the long run, and we just need to be more tolerant of the way that people think differently, and that's just, you know, more and more important all the time.